Daniel, why is my suitcase outside?
Mom, you can't stay here anymore.
In my own home?
Dad is gone now. Things have changed.
Your father was buried 3
I
days
know.
ago. Then why are you doing this today? Are you ashamed of me because I walk with a stick?
The suitcase hit the wet porch with a heavy thud. Margaret Bennett flinched. Her hand tightened around her walking stick as rain blew across the front steps of the house she had lived in for 42 years. Her son Daniel stood in the doorway, one hand on the doorframe, the other holding a black garbage bag filled with her clothes. "Daniel," Margaret whispered, looking from the suitcase to his face. "What is this?" Daniel did not answer immediately. Behind him, his wife Olivia stood with her arms folded over her pregnant belly. She looked beautiful, polished, expensive, and completely unmoved. "Mom," Daniel said at last, "you can't stay here anymore." Margaret blinked slowly, as if the rain had entered her ears and changed the words. "I can't stay in my own home." Daniel looked away. "Dad is gone now." Margaret's lips trembled. "Your father was buried 3 days ago." "I know. Then why are you doing this today?" Olivia stepped forward. "Margaret, please don't make this harder than it already is." Margaret turned her eyes to her daughter-in-law. "Harder for who?" Olivia's face tightened. "For everyone." Margaret looked back at Daniel. "Son, talk to me. What have I done?" Daniel swallowed. For one brief second, he looked like the boy she used to tuck into bed. Then his face hardened again. "Olivia is due next month. We need space. We need peace. We need a normal home." "A normal home?" Margaret repeated. Daniel's eyes dropped to her weak leg, then to the walking stick in her hand. That glance hurt more than the rain. Margaret's voice cracked. "Are you ashamed of me?" Daniel said nothing. But Olivia answered. "It's not shame. It's reality. A newborn baby should not grow up around sadness, hospital smell, walking sticks, and all this heaviness." Margaret stared at her. "Heaviness." Daniel stepped outside and placed the garbage bag beside the suitcase. "Mom, I've arranged somewhere for you to go." Margaret's breathing changed. "Where?" Daniel rubbed his forehead. "A senior shelter for now." The words entered her chest like cold iron. "A shelter? It's temporary." "This is my home, Daniel." It was Dad's house. Margaret went still. For a moment, even the rain seemed to pause. Then she said softly, "Your father and I built this house together." Daniel's jaw clenched. "Legally, the estate has to be sorted out." "Legally?" Margaret repeated. "You are talking to your mother about legally?" Olivia sighed. "Margaret, please. Daniel is already under enough pressure." Margaret looked at her son again. "Daniel, look at me." He didn't. "Look at me." Slowly, he raised his eyes. She pointed a shaking finger toward the hallway behind him. "I carried you through that hallway when you had fever. I sat awake beside your bed when you couldn't breathe. I prayed for you in that living room. Your father and I sold my jewelry to pay your school fees." Daniel's face twitched, but he remained silent. Margaret continued, her voice now broken but firm. "And today, 3 days after your father's funeral, you are throwing me into the rain?" Daniel whispered, "Don't make me the villain." Margaret laughed once, but there was no joy in it. "I don't have to make you anything. You have chosen it yourself." Olivia touched Daniel's shoulder. "Close the door. She'll only keep talking." Margaret looked at Olivia's hand on her son's shoulder. Then she looked at Daniel. "Is this your decision, or hers?" Daniel's face darkened. "That's enough." "No," Margaret said. "Answer me." Daniel stepped closer. "My child will be born soon. I don't want him growing up afraid." Margaret's mouth opened slightly. "Afraid of who?" Daniel glanced again at her stick. "At this. At the way things are." Margaret slowly looked down at her damaged leg. For years, she had covered the pain with long skirts and silence. For years, she had made jokes when the pain became too much. For years, she had told Daniel not to blame himself. Now he stood before her, using the very injury she carried for him as a reason to remove her from her own home. She whispered, "Daniel," but her voice failed. The front gate opened suddenly. A man rushed in through the rain. "Mom!" Michael Bennett ran up the path, his coat soaked, his face filled with panic. He stopped when he saw the suitcase, the garbage bag, and Margaret standing outside. His eyes moved to Daniel. "What is going on?" Daniel looked annoyed. "Michael, this doesn't concern you." Michael stepped between Margaret and the door. "She is our mother. It concerns me." Olivia rolled her eyes. "Please don't start drama." Michael turned to her. "Drama?" She is standing in the rain with her clothes in a garbage bag. Daniel snapped. I said I handled it. Michael's voice rose. You call this handling it? Margaret touched Michael's arm. Please, don't fight. But Michael was already shaking with anger. He turned back to Daniel. Dad is barely in the ground, and you're already pushing her out. Daniel pointed at him. Watch your tone in my house. Michael froze. Your house. Daniel's silence answered. Michael laughed bitterly. So that's what this is. Dad dies, and suddenly you own everything. I'm the one who stayed here, Daniel said. You stayed here because Mom let you. Because Dad let you. Because this house was family. Olivia stepped forward. Michael, you don't understand. We're having a baby. This environment is not healthy. Michael stared at her. Not healthy? You mean Mom? Olivia looked away. Michael's face hardened. Say it. Say what you really mean. Daniel grabbed Michael's arm. Enough. Michael pulled away. No. I want to hear it. You are throwing her out because she walks with a stick? Because she limps? Because she doesn't fit your perfect family picture? Margaret whispered. Michael, please. But Michael's eyes were wet now. He pointed at Daniel. You should be ashamed of yourself. Daniel's voice dropped. You don't know what it's like. Michael stared at him in disbelief. I don't know what is like. Daniel's face twisted. To carry this family. To be the real son. To be the one everyone expects to step up. Margaret stiffened. Michael went silent. Daniel had said the words before he could stop himself. The real son. Olivia looked at Daniel quickly, warning in her eyes. Michael slowly nodded. There it is. Daniel looked away. Michael stepped closer. You think being the real son means inheriting the house? The company? Dad's money? Daniel said nothing. Michael's voice shook. No, Daniel. Being a real son means remembering what your mother did for you. Daniel's face changed. Don't. Michael's eyes burned. No, you don't get to say don't. Margaret's hand tightened around his sleeve. Michael, leave it. But he could no longer hold it in. You were 12, Daniel. She told you not to play ball near the street. You laughed. You kicked that ball straight into the road. You ran after it like a foolish child. Daniel's face went pale. Olivia looked confused. What is he talking about? Michael kept going. That truck came around the corner too fast. You froze. You didn't move. Mom ran into the road and pushed you out of the way. Daniel whispered, Stop. No, Michael said. Let your wife hear it. Let the whole neighborhood hear it. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. Michael pointed at her injured leg. She didn't lose that leg because of age. She didn't lose it because of sickness. She lost it because she saved your life. Olivia's hand dropped from her belly. Daniel stepped back as if Michael had slapped him. The rain poured harder. Michael's voice broke. She spent months in hospital. She screamed at night when she thought we were asleep. Dad sat beside her bed, crying like a child. And you held her hand and promised her you would take care of her forever. Margaret covered her mouth. Daniel looked at the porch floor. Michael stepped closer to him. And today, the same mother who gave her leg so you could walk is being thrown out because you don't want your child to see her limp? Nobody spoke. For the first time, Olivia looked uncomfortable. Margaret wiped her tears. Michael, enough. But Michael shook his head. No, Mom. Not enough. You protected him for too long. Daniel whispered. I was a child. Michael answered. And now you are a man. So act like one. Daniel's face hardened again, but his eyes were wet. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. Michael looked at him with disgust. Pressure? She buried her husband 3 days ago. Daniel shouted. I said I found somewhere for her. A shelter. Michael shouted back. You found your mother a shelter. Margaret stepped between them as much as her weak body allowed. Please, both of you. Your father would hate this. At the mention of Richard, everyone fell quiet. Then, from across the street, a black sedan rolled slowly toward the house. It stopped beside the curb. The driver's door opened. An older man in a dark suit stepped out, holding a leather folder under his arm. He looked at the suitcase, then at Margaret, then at Daniel. His face became hard. Mrs. Bennet. Margaret turned slowly. Yes. The man walked through the rain and stood at the bottom of the porch steps. My name is Charles Whitmore. I was your husband's attorney. Daniel immediately straightened. Mr. Whitmore, we've been waiting for you. We need to discuss the estate. The lawyer ignored him. His eyes remained on Margaret's wet clothes and trembling hands. Madam, he said quietly, why are you outside? Margaret could not answer. Michael answered for her. Because her son threw her out. The lawyer turned toward Daniel. Daniel swallowed. It's a family matter. Charles Whitmore looked at the suitcase again. Then he looked Daniel directly in the eye. No, Mr. Bennett. He lifted the leather folder. Now it is a legal matter. Daniel's face changed. Olivia stepped back. Margaret's heart began to pound. The lawyer opened the folder slightly, just enough for Daniel to see a sealed envelope inside. Your father left instructions, Charles said. Daniel forced a smile. Good. Then let's read the will. Charles closed the folder. Not today. Daniel frowned. Why not? The lawyer looked at Margaret. Because before your father's will can be read, I need to confirm whether one condition has already been broken. Daniel's voice lowered. What condition? Charles stared at him. The condition regarding how his wife must be treated after his death. Margaret's lips parted. Michael slowly turned toward Daniel. Olivia whispered, Daniel. The lawyer continued. And from what I have just seen, your father may have known you better than you knew yourself. A heavy silence fell over the porch. Then Charles looked at Margaret and spoke gently. Mrs. Bennett, do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight? Before Margaret could respond, Michael answered. Yes, with me. Daniel muttered. She doesn't need to go with him. Michael turned sharply. You lost the right to decide what she needs. Margaret looked at Daniel one last time. Her son stood in the doorway of the house she had built, surrounded by warmth, light, and everything she had sacrificed for. Then she looked at Michael, soaked in rain, holding her suitcase with both hands. For the first time that day, she made a decision. I'll go with Michael. Daniel's face tightened. Mom. She raised her hand. No, not now. Michael gently helped her down the steps. As they walked toward his car, Daniel called after her. You'll understand one day. Margaret stopped. Without turning around, she said, No, Daniel. One day you will. Then she climbed into Michael's car. And as the rain washed over the Bennett mansion, Attorney Charles Whitmore stood on the porch, staring at Daniel like a man who had just watched someone destroy his own inheritance with both hands. Michael slammed the car door shut and turned the key twice before the engine finally started. Margaret sat beside him, soaked, silent, and staring through the windshield like someone whose soul had been left behind on the porch. Michael gripped the steering wheel. Mom, say something. Margaret did not look at him. He called at his house. Michael's jaw tightened. He was angry. No, Margaret said softly. Anger speaks fast. Daniel spoke like he had rehearsed it. Michael swallowed hard. Behind them, the mansion lights glowed through the rain. Margaret turned slightly and looked back. I left your father's picture on the hallway table. I'll get it tomorrow. No, she whispered. Daniel may throw that away too. Michael hit the brakes. Margaret looked at him. What are you doing? Michael's eyes were burning. I'm going back. Michael, no. He can insult me. He can insult the will. He can insult anything he wants. But he will not throw away Dad's memory. Margaret grabbed his arm. Please. I have lost one son tonight. Don't make me watch another one fight him. Michael froze. That sentence entered him like a knife. Slowly, he drove on. A few minutes later, his phone rang. Daniel's name appeared on the screen. Michael rejected the call. It rang again. He rejected it again. Then a message came in. Michael read it aloud, his voice bitter. Bring Mom back tomorrow. We need to settle things properly. Margaret closed her eyes. Settle things, she repeated. Michael threw the phone on the seat. He is not worried about you. He is worried about what the lawyer saw. Margaret's voice was tired. Your brother was not always like this. Michael stared at the road. No, but maybe he was always capable of it. At the mansion, Daniel paced the living room while Olivia stood near the stairs. You shouldn't have said real son, Olivia said. Daniel turned sharply. That's what you're worried about. Yes, Daniel. Because if Michael starts digging, this will become messy. Daniel laughed nervously. Messy? My father is dead. My mother is acting like a victim. Michael is playing hero. And that lawyer is threatening me on my own porch. Olivia stepped closer. Then stopped behaving guilty. Daniel looked at her. I'm not guilty. Olivia's silence answered louder than words. Daniel pointed at her. Don't look at me like that. You agreed she couldn't stay. I agreed she needed care. I didn't ask you to throw her things outside in the rain. Daniel's face changed. You told me the baby would be scared. I said it once. You said it every day. Olivia folded her arms. Because it is true. But you were the one who packed her suitcase. Daniel opened his mouth, then closed it. For the first time that night, the house felt too quiet. At Michael's small apartment, his wife Rachel opened the door before he could knock. The moment she saw Margaret, her face broke. Oh, Mom. Margaret tried to smile. I'm sorry to arrive like this. Rachel stepped aside quickly. Don't ever apologize for coming home. Margaret's eyes filled again. Home. The word almost destroyed her. Rachel took the suitcase from Michael. Your room is ready. Margaret frowned. My room. Rachel nodded. Our room. No, no, Margaret said quickly. I will sleep on the couch. Rachel held her hand. You spent years giving everyone else the bed. Tonight, someone gives you one. Michael looked away, wiping his eyes with his thumb. Margaret whispered, I don't want to be a burden. Rachel answered immediately. Then don't call love a burden. Margaret could not speak after that. Later that night, while Margaret slept, Michael stood in the kitchen staring at his phone. Rachel came beside him. You're thinking of going back there. Michael nodded. He humiliated her. I know. He used her leg against her. Rachel's eyes lowered. She never told me the full story. Michael leaned against the counter. She saved him. Daniel was chasing a ball into the road. Mom pushed him away before the truck hit him. Rachel covered her mouth. And he knows? He remembers enough. Then how could he say those things? Michael's voice dropped. Because money makes some people forget the hands that raised them. His phone rang again. This time it was Attorney Whitmore. Michael answered quickly. Mr. Whitmore? The lawyer's voice was calm, but serious. Is Mrs. Bennett safe? Yes. She's with me. Good. Do not take her back to that house tonight. Michael frowned. Why? Because your father left very specific instructions. If what I witnessed is confirmed, Daniel may have already disqualified himself from part of the estate. Michael's eyes widened. What kind of instructions? There was a pause. I cannot discuss the will over the phone. But tomorrow morning, I need you to bring your mother to my office. Michael glanced toward the bedroom door. She's exhausted. I understand. But this cannot wait. Michael's voice hardened. Is Daniel going to hurt her legally? The lawyer answered carefully. Daniel may try. That is why we must move first. The call ended. Rachel stared at Michael. What did he say? Michael looked toward the room where Margaret slept. He said Dad knew this might happen. Rachel whispered, How? Michael shook his head. I don't know. But tomorrow, we find out. If this story is already touching your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment what you would do if you were in Margaret's position. Because what happens next will reveal that Richard Bennett did not just leave behind a will. He left behind a trap for the child who forgot his mother's sacrifice. The next morning, Daniel arrived at Whitmore's office before everyone else. Olivia followed behind him, holding her handbag tightly. Daniel forced a smile at the receptionist. Daniel Bennett. I'm here for the reading of my father's will. The receptionist checked the screen. Mr. Whitmore asked everyone to wait. Daniel frowned. Everyone. Before she could answer, the elevator opened. Michael stepped out with Margaret beside him. Margaret wore a simple gray dress. Her face was tired, but her head was high. Daniel walked toward her. Mom. Margaret stopped. He softened his voice. I didn't sleep all night. Michael muttered. She didn't have a house all night. Daniel glared at him. Margaret raised one hand. Not here. Olivia stepped forward. Margaret, yesterday was emotional. We all said things. Margaret looked at her calmly. You said my presence was heaviness. Olivia's cheeks flushed. I didn't mean it that way. Yes, Margaret said. You did. Daniel looked around nervously. Can we please not do this in public? Michael stepped closer. You made it public when you threw her into the rain. The office door opened. Attorney Whitmore stood there with a folder in his hand. Enough. Everyone turned. His eyes moved from Daniel to Margaret. Mrs. Bennett, please come in. Daniel stepped forward. We're all coming in. Whitmore looked at him. No. First, I speak with your mother alone. Daniel stiffened. Why? The lawyer's face did not change. Because unlike yesterday, today someone in this building will respect her. Attorney Whitmore closed the office door behind Margaret and gently motioned for her to sit. I wish Richard were here instead of me, he said quietly. Margaret lowered herself into the chair. So do I. Whitmore slid a tissue box across the desk. He knew this day might come. Margaret frowned. What do you mean? He changed his will 6 months ago. She stared at him. He changed it. Whitmore nodded. He told me. Charles, if anything ever happens to me first, promise me you'll watch how my family treats Margaret before you read a single word of this will. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. He knew. He hoped he was wrong. There was a knock. Whitmore opened the door. Please send Mr. Michael Bennett in. Michael entered and sat beside Margaret. Whitmore looked at them both. I need to ask one question, and I want the truth." He folded his hands. "Yesterday, was Mrs. Bennet forced to leave the family home?" Michael answered immediately. "Yes." Margaret interrupted. "Charles, don't make this worse." Whitmore looked directly at her. "Mrs. Bennet, your husband made me promise that if anyone tried to silence you, I would not allow it." He turned back to Michael. "What happened?" Michael described the suitcase, the rain, Daniel's words, and Olivia's remarks. Whitmore took careful notes. Then he quietly asked, "Did Daniel say why he wanted her gone?" Michael hesitated. "He said he didn't want his child growing up seeing her disability." Whitmore slowly removed his glasses. For several seconds, he said nothing. Finally, he whispered. Richard predicted almost the exact words. Margaret gasped. Outside the office, Daniel paced impatiently. "This is ridiculous." Olivia glanced toward the closed door. "Maybe your father just wanted to comfort your mother." Daniel shook his head. "No, something isn't right." The receptionist looked up. "Mr. Bennet, Mr. Whitmore will see everyone shortly." Daniel forced a smile. "I've managed my father's company for years. This shouldn't take long." The receptionist politely replied, "Mr. Whitmore asked me to remind everyone that today's meeting will follow your father's written instructions exactly." Daniel's smile faded. A few minutes later, Whitmore invited everyone into the conference room. A large framed photograph of Richard Bennet stood at one end of the room. For a moment, nobody spoke. Whitmore placed the sealed envelope on the table. "I will begin shortly." Daniel leaned forward. "Before we start, I'd like to discuss transferring the company accounts." Whitmore raised a hand. "There will be no discussion until your father's instructions have been read." Daniel leaned back, frustrated. Whitmore looked around the room. "I also want everyone to understand that your father anticipated disagreements. He left additional letters, witness statements, and legal documents that support every decision contained in this will." Olivia exchanged a worried glance with Daniel. Michael quietly reached over and held Margaret's hand. She squeezed it gently. Daniel noticed. "You've always enjoyed playing the hero." Michael calmly replied, "No, I just remember what Mom did for us." Daniel looked away. Whitmore broke the silence. "Mr. Bennet, would you like to clarify something before we begin?" Daniel frowned. "Clarify what?" "The events of yesterday." Daniel crossed his arms. "It was a family disagreement." Michael spoke immediately. "It was an eviction. It was temporary. You packed her belongings in garbage bags. I found her somewhere to stay. A shelter." Daniel slammed his hand on the table. "I was trying to do what was best for everyone." Margaret finally spoke. "Did you ever ask what was best for me?" Daniel's expression softened. She continued quietly. "You made every decision about my future without asking me a single question." The room fell silent. Whitmore opened the envelope but did not remove the papers. Instead, he looked directly at Daniel. "Your father included one handwritten note outside the will." Daniel leaned forward. "What does it say?" Whitmore answered slowly. "It says, 'Charles, before you read my will, look into my son's eyes. If he has become the man I fear he may become, then my written words will matter more than ever.'" Daniel's confidence began to disappear. Whitmore placed the handwritten note on the table where everyone could see Richard's signature. Then he rested his hand on the sealed will. "I will now begin reading Richard Bennet's final wishes." The room became completely silent. Attorney Whitmore carefully unfolded the first page and looked around the room. "This document represents the final wishes of Richard Bennet, signed in the presence of 2 witnesses and duly registered." No one moved. He began reading. "To my beloved wife, Margaret, if you are hearing these words, then I am no longer by your side. Thank you for giving me the happiest years of my life." Margaret lowered her head, fighting back tears. Whitmore continued. "You gave me a home long before we built a house. You gave our children a mother they never deserved to lose." Daniel swallowed hard. The lawyer turned the page. "Now I must speak to my sons." Daniel instinctively sat up. "Daniel, Michael, if you are together in this room, then my greatest wish is that you remain brothers after I am gone." Whitmore paused before reading the next sentence. "But if either of you has forgotten the meaning of family, then let this will remind you." The room became painfully quiet. Daniel forced a nervous smile. "Dad always talked like this." Whitmore ignored him. 28 years ago, Margaret gave up part of her body so our son could keep his life. Every step she has taken since then has carried pain that should have belonged to someone else." Daniel slowly lowered his eyes. A vivid memory flashed through his mind. A soccer ball rolling into the street. His mother's scream. Powerful hands shoving him away. The deafening sound of brakes. The hospital. His mother's pale face. His own small hand wrapped around hers. Mom, I promise I'll always take care of you. The memory disappeared as quickly as it came. Whitmore continued reading. Daniel, if you still honor that promise, then I am proud to call you my son. Another pause. If you have broken that promise, then you have already judged yourself. Daniel's breathing became uneven. Olivia reached for his hand. He quietly pulled it away. Whitmore turned another page. Before my estate is divided, I instructed my attorney to observe how Margaret is treated after my death. The lawyer looked directly at Daniel. I have done exactly that. Daniel finally spoke. Dad couldn't have expected everything. Whitmore answered calmly. No, but he expected enough. He resumed reading. If Margaret is ever forced from the home we built together, pressured to leave, humiliated because of her disability, or denied the dignity she deserves, then my biological son shall immediately forfeit every inheritance I intended for him. Daniel shot to his feet. What? Olivia gasped. That can't be legal. Whitmore calmly placed another document on the table. It is. Daniel's voice rose. No, my father wouldn't do that. Whitmore slid a second folder across the table. Your father reviewed these clauses with 3 separate attorneys. Daniel grabbed the papers with trembling hands. Every signature was there. Every witness. Every seal. Everything was valid. He looked at Margaret. Mom, tell him. Margaret remained silent. Daniel walked toward her. I didn't mean it. Michael stood between them. Yesterday you meant every word. Daniel looked desperate. I was emotional. Michael shook his head. You packed her clothes before she even came home from the funeral. Daniel froze. Whitmore continued reading. To Michael. Michael looked up. You entered our family through adoption, but you entered my heart the day you called me Dad. Daniel's eyes widened. Olivia turned sharply toward Michael. Adopted? Michael looked just as surprised. What? Margaret stared at the lawyer. Richard. Whitmore smiled gently. Richard wanted the truth known only after his death. He continued. Blood may explain how a family begins, but love decides whether it survives. Michael's eyes filled with tears. Michael, thank you for loving your mother exactly as she loved you. Silence filled the room. Daniel slowly turned toward Michael. You're adopted? Michael looked at Margaret. She nodded through her tears. We wanted you both to grow up as brothers. Daniel stepped backward. His entire world suddenly felt different. Whitmore read the final pages. Everything I own shall belong to Margaret for the rest of her life. She alone will decide how it is used. Margaret covered her face. After Margaret's lifetime, every remaining asset, including the company, the family home, and all investments, shall pass to Michael Bennett, because he has demonstrated that character is a greater inheritance than blood. Daniel's knees gave way. He dropped into a chair. No. Whitmore closed the will. It is finished. Daniel looked at his mother with tears streaming down his face. I'm sorry. Margaret looked at him quietly. For what, Daniel? He couldn't answer. For throwing you out. He nodded. For forgetting what you sacrificed. He nodded again. For choosing money over family? He whispered, yes. Margaret slowly stood. She walked toward him. For one hopeful moment, Daniel thought she might embrace him. Instead, she gently rested her hand on his shoulder. I forgave you yesterday. Daniel looked up. Then, can we go home? Margaret smiled sadly. The house was never what made us a family. She looked around the room. You broke something much harder to rebuild. Daniel buried his face in his hands. Michael quietly walked over and placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. Daniel looked up in disbelief. After everything I've done, why? Michael answered softly. Because Mom didn't raise me to become you. Margaret broke into tears. Months later, the Bennett mansion looked different. The front gate now carried a new sign. The Richard and Margaret Bennett Hope Center. The house welcomed elderly people who had been abandoned by their families. It also provided rehabilitation services for amputees learning to walk again. Children laughed in the gardens. Volunteers filled the hallways. Margaret smiled more than she had in years. Michael managed the foundation with humility. Rachel coordinated community programs. Daniel came every Saturday. Not as an owner. Not as an heir. As a volunteer. He cleaned rooms. Served meals. Pushed wheelchairs. Never once asking for recognition. One afternoon, He found Margaret sitting beneath the old oak tree Richard had planted decades earlier. He sat beside her. "Mom." She looked at him. "I can't change what I did." "No. But can I spend the rest of my life trying to become the son I promised I'd be?" Margaret reached over and held his hand. "That choice begins every morning." Daniel nodded. "I'll keep choosing." Margaret smiled. "So will I." The sun slowly disappeared behind the trees as 3 generations of families laughed outside the old Bennett home. A home no longer built on wealth, but on compassion. Sometimes the greatest inheritance is not money. Sometimes it is the chance to become a better person before it is too late. If this story touched your heart, let us know in the comments. Do you think Margaret made the right decision, or would you have given Daniel another chance? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story with someone who believes that family is defined not just by blood, but by love. We'll see you in the next unforgettable story.